Once again, thank you all for joining us. This is Nuance, and I am Mike Scala, joined as always by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Oh man, just another early morning.
Early morning to you, early evening here, and I gotta say, the rain has come back, and I'm not with that. I thought we were done. I kind of was hoping that we had our fill of rain for the entire season, maybe the entire year, because it rained for like a week constantly, and we had some sunshine. But nope, back to the rain.
Well, I mean, it hit like 60 degrees or something here the other day, and I was hoping that was the extent of winter, but no, wake up and it's, chilly again. So disappointment all around.
The eternal optimist. You hope that 60 degrees is the extent of winter.
Yeah, that's and that's the best that we should have to get, or the worst we should have to deal with.
I agree.
Well, I did see that you were on the other side of the mic this past week in a podcast appearance.
Yes, that's right. And it's funny, we've been doing this every Tuesday that I've kind of fallen into podcast show host mode, I guess. And
you took over.
Yeah, that vibe, right? That whole demeanor, even in the way I speak. A friend of mine once said, I was with a friend and I was having what I thought was a casual conversation, and they were like, and I asked a question, right? And they were like, I can't not hear that in your podcast voice, like it sounds like we're on a podcast and you're interviewing me, even though we're just speaking as friends right now. So I guess that has become me. But you know what? The experience of doing Nuance probably helps me even on the other side, right? Because it's just practice speaking on a live show or a recorded show, whatever it is, but thinking on your feet, right? It's kind of in the same vein as making an argument in court. The more you do it, the more practice you get, the better you get in that type of scenario. And so
right.
I think that this experience here on Nuance is helpful in all of these situations I find myself in.
Yeah, and especially in dealing with the dreaded bane of any sort of live performance or broadcast is blank air, dead air, and having to think on your feet and move to be able to fill that up, so there's just not this space.
Right. Well, I think the burden of that though falls more on the host, right? Because I wasn't thinking that being interviewed, I was just focused on answering the questions. I think when the person being interviewed stops, that's when the host jumps in to make sure there's no dead air. But this one happened to be pre-recorded, so he also had the benefit of editing out any dead space, which I don't think there was, because it was a very lively discussion about the Queen's Link, and I was on it along with Andrew Lynch, who is the chief design officer of the Queen's Link. And so there was a lot to talk about, and sometimes the host, Ben Max, I got to shout him out, Max Politics Podcast. Ben Max, for those who don't know, is behind the Gotham Gazette, so pretty prominent New York City publication, and he's pretty big time journalist, I would say, here in the city. So sometimes he would ask a question, and between the two of us, we all wanted to get our points in. It really wasn't any dead air. It was more a matter of trying not to step over each other with what we wanted to say, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it must have been, like I said, a little bit different from the norm. Did you or were you tempted to ask questions and lead the conversation yourself? Especially if there were other guests, be like, yeah, okay, well, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that might have happened once or twice, but that might have actually been my attorney side shining through more so than the host side, because I said something and then the host asked a follow-up question to Andrew, and then I jumped in before Andrew could answer. And I say, Andrew, before you answer that, let me just clear something up from what I said, because I want to be clear on my answer and not get any pushback or criticism over what I just said. I want to have a full record here of the answer. Okay, I made that clear. All right, now Andrew, now you answer the question. So for that moment, I was dictating the pace of the show, and the host was just sitting back like, okay, I guess Mike is now in charge here.
Right. That's funny.
But that's what lawyers do in a deposition, right? I felt maybe that I had a little bit of liberty to do that because I was brought on as counsel and legal advisor
Right.
to the Queen's Link. So let's say the other guest, Andrew, is the witness on a deposition. I might be like, well, hold on a second. Before the witness answers the question, I'm going to instruct him, or whatever. I'm there as his lawyer too.
True. That's what's up. So
Yeah.
it sounds like it was a good experience overall, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I encourage everyone to go check out that episode because we do talk in depth about the status of the Queens Link plan, especially coming out of the MTA's 20-year needs assessment report, which just dropped this past week. And so there's very up-to-date information in that episode. And I think we laid out very well because the host, to his credit, did a lot of research coming into it. And so he knew what to ask. And he was able to tease out all the factors that play the political landscape, right? The MTA stuff, the technical, more technical aspects of the line itself, all these different things so that you can see. He even asked what the opposition was. And that's on my stories now. You can go and get a taste of how I answered that question. What do people say who are against the train? And what is your response to them? And so it was a very in-depth conversation. And I was grateful for the experience.
That's what's up.
But one funny thing that you just mentioned, which got me thinking, you said the dread, I don't forget how you put it. Was it the bane or thinking about, I think you said dead air, but basically this idea of you're going into something like that and you're dreading something, right? Like it's in your head before it even happens. You're saying, I hope I get this right. I hope this doesn't happen. I hope this goes well. And I always find that no matter what we're talking about, the dread or the anticipation of something is always like 100 times worse than the actual event. No matter what it is. I think we drive ourselves crazy sometimes, whether we have to give a big speech or a presentation at work, or you're being interviewed or whatever it is, right? And really anything that might make you a little nervous, give you anxiety, something we have to get done, right?
Sure.
Thinking about it stresses us out more than actually doing it, right? We think about how bad it's going to be, but it's never as bad as we think it's going to be. That's always my experience.
No, and that's, I think that's true for a lot of things. We build up stuff up in our minds that it can really put people off on even trying to do something, or even derail the possibilities, or just mess up the performance in general. I think even as performers, people have something similar.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, you're going to do a show or whatever, and you're thinking in your head all the things that you don't want to go wrong. And you're right. It could actually cripple the performance. It could, you could be crippled with that anxiety to the point you can't perform. And there's something called an optimal performance scale or some graph. Have you ever seen this? There's a graph that shows you that people perform at their peak when they have a little bit of anxiety, but at a certain point of anxiety, we keep increasing the anxiety, the performance is going to go down. And so you want a little bit, but not too much anxiety, because a little bit keeps you on your toes and makes you actually think about all the things that you want to get right and not want to mess up, right? You want to be a little nervous about it because you don't want to be too lackadaisical either, to the point where you don't care. And then you could give in a phoned in performance, or, just lazy. So there's a little bit of nerves is good, but not too much to the point where it interferes with your ability to perform.
Right. Yeah. And that makes sense. I've never seen that scale, but that definitely makes sense. And people tend to have, like, especially if you're talking about giving a speech or going out in front of people or doing something like that, people have different ways that they deal with those nerves or that anxiety. And, when we would do a lot of performances, I don't think I ever got nervous that we were about the performance that we were going to do. But I do remember, like, every time before we would go do a performance or a show, I'd always need food. And it wasn't that I was nervous. It's just like suddenly just I'm hungry, like for some reason.
Right. It could be even a subconscious way.
Maybe, I don't know.
Nerves or that anxiousness manifesting. I never really it becomes second nature. I think
it does.
Yeah, you don't really get nerves. Even now, if I'm going to give a speech or I'm going to be on a show, I don't get nervous about it anymore. I don't know if I ever really did. Maybe at the beginning when I first started doing that and the whole world was foreign to me or new, maybe then I would have nerves. I really don't feel that now. I remember when I did the Queens Link press conference that we just did in front of City Hall last month. I didn't have nerves that day or really at all. I think it might have just been leading up to it. It was something else that was on my plate that was stressing me a little bit about the month of September, when I was thinking, okay, look at my month, look at my calendar. I've got all these events. I've got this press conference. I want to prepare for it a little bit, but I've got these cases coming up, and you just start thinking about all these things that you have to do. And that to me sometimes stresses me or bothers me more than actually doing them. Because after getting through September, I was fine, obviously, right? And I was like looking back on it, thinking, yeah, that wasn't really that bad. It was just every day it was something else. But when you are anticipating all this stress, all this stuff, what can go wrong, whatever, but less so what can go wrong and more so all the things I have to take care of. And then you start to think, I don't have a lot of wiggle room. That's really, I think, for me, I'll start thinking, okay, I can get all this done if nothing bad happens. But let's say, God forbid, I'm in a car accident or something, something that I'm not anticipating comes up. Then how am I going to still get all the stuff done if I'm all of a sudden now faced with these other things that I wasn't considering, right? Because now you're on a very tight schedule. So I do start to think about little things like that, right? But I still think that it's just kind of in your head. I mean, thank God nothing bad happened, but oftentimes we build this up in our heads, like, man, like this is going to be rough, but you just do it day by day, and it's really not bad, right?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I think as far as, the public speaking and being in front and having, everyone like looking at you and whatnot, some of that, I think, there was experience before that with performing on stage, you know what I mean? And I think some of that could be alleviated from that experience because, like, you've done it before. You've done it a lot. You've had tons of people staring at you when you're the focus of attention and you've got something to deliver, and everyone's looking at you. You don't want to make a mistake and you want to give a good performance and this and that. And so, like, it's not dissimilar from giving a speech in front of an audience.
Yeah. And two things on that. Number one, I do have a distinct memory of first starting out giving speeches in a political context and thinking, wow, this is like me getting on stage and rhyming, but so much easier because I don't have to make the words rhyme. So I could just say whatever. Before, it's like I was saying something and trying to deliver a message while also making it rhyme and while also being on beat and while also doing these other things. Now I just can just say words. That is just so easy, right? It's just one of the many facets of being on stage and doing a rap song. It's, what I mean? It's like 1/10 of that. So I remember thinking that this is like so much easier. And the other part of it, I was going to make on that. Damn, now I forgot. I lost my train of thought.
About how much easier it is.
About how much easier it is. Yeah. So that was the first thing. But what that's the other point in there. You said I wanted to go on stage and deliver something, right? I have something to deliver, whether it's a song or performance of songs or it's a speech or what have you. But that's the key to it: delivering something. If you have something to deliver, you're more confident and you're less nervous, right? Because you're not thinking, what are they going to think about it? I hope they like it. No, you know that you have something to deliver. This is what you want to say. This is what you want to get across. And so now you don't care, right? That gives you the power. You don't care how it's received. I mean, of course you want it to be received well, but it kind of flips the dynamics around to the point where you're not thinking about that in your head. When I'm giving that speech, I'm not thinking, I hope all these people out there like it. I'm thinking, I know they're going to like it, or at least they're going to want to hear what I have to say, and then they can do what they want with it. But there's no reason for me to be nervous about it because I've got something to deliver. And I know that I want to deliver this message. So I'm going to go out there and deliver it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not something that I should worry about.
Right. Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And
but I think
the more prepared you are, and you don't have to go out there and overtly prepare for everything, but the more prepared you are, the more confident you're going to be. And that really came into play when I did the debates, because I had a really good debate prep team, especially this last campaign that we did, where they laid out everything I would possibly need to know, right? And I remember this also when I was younger, watching debates, let's say for president or governor on TV, and you think, how do they know how to answer all of these questions? It was so impressive to me when I was young, because in my mind, I was thinking they can literally ask them anything in the world and they're going to come out and they usually sound pretty polished on that level. But you then realize that it's not really a secret what's going to be asked. I mean, if you're debating, let's say, for a New York City Council seat, you pretty much know the universe of questions they're going to ask you about the issues that are relevant to the city council or we're going on in the city that year, right? And so it is pretty easy to prepare for it. Not saying that it's easy and that doesn't take effort, but what I mean is it's not like some mystery, right? It's
Right.
information that you need is available to you. So if you are willing to put that time in, you can learn and really be so prepared to the point where you're not going to be nervous because you know everything they're going to ask you. There's not going to be any surprises. And this debate prep that I did was so good. They gave me numbers like, how many hospital beds are there at St. John's or whatever, little facts that if I knew, okay, I'm going to get a question on healthcare, I've got my facts and figures that I can use for that. And once you have that level of preparation, you really don't feel nervous. Maybe you're excited because you know that you're about to kill it. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, I'm good. They can ask me anything I already know, anything that they could possibly ask. And I know what I'm going to say about whatever they're going to ask me. And so let's go. There's nothing now to fear, right? Let's just do it.
Right.
So
yeah, just
is key. But again, it doesn't mean
absolutely.
you got to prepare for hours for everything that you do. And that's another trick of being in politics. You might go out and you might have like 5 speeches in a day. You're not going to spend hours writing every one, but you have to be familiar with the issues and what's going on, be able to think on your feet and be able to draw from what you know, your knowledge, and put something together. And of course, there's a skill in that, and that takes practice too, but that's also part of your preparation, right? I've done this 100 times. There's nothing new. Let's go and do it.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if you're talking about, a topic that you're familiar with, right? And if you're out there giving speeches and you're talking about something generally that you're passionate about, something that you're working towards, something that you want to say. And so even if you don't remember verbatim what the speech is, you know the material. And so that alleviates some of the pressure as well, because then you can speak from what you know at the same time. And so it really works well that way.
Absolutely. So there you go. Some knowledge being dropped on Nuance.
Boom. That's what it is. So the bottom line is everybody should have a chance to go out and get on stage and start rapping. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
No, but you know what? It doesn't have to be hip hop, but I think it is helpful to go out there and get some kind of performance experience of any kind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of even been recommended that people should do some sort of performance art at least try it, stand-up comedy, on stage singing or something, theater, some kind of performance art, and that deals that helps with this anxiety of public speaking or being in front of people or whatnot.
Right. They say public speaking is the number one fear people have in life.
Right. I remember a couple of years ago, there was it was some kind of a news story where they were talking about that. And I guess some of the younger folks were saying that equating forcing people to do speeches in school to some sort of abuse. And
yeah.
And it's like, what? Like, get over it. We had to go through it. You're going through it too. Get over it. And it's a useful skill to have.
It absolutely is, right? Because there are going to be times in your life when you're going to have to do something that resembles public speaking, even if it's not giving a speech in front of a bunch of people. I mean, what if it's making a presentation at work or
right?
Like there's going to be some times and maybe it might be uncomfortable, but the more practice you have, the more experience you have, you're able to pull from these memories even and say, yeah, I did that in school and it wasn't terrible. Again, thinking about it was much worse than actually doing it. Because when you're doing it, you don't have time to think about how nerve-wracking this is, or you're just trying to focus on getting the thing done, right? And then you sit down and you're like, man, it wasn't bad at all. Well, why was I dreading this? So
to
get ourselves to do that.
Jeremy in the chat brings up a good point. He said that I get up and speak at civics and meetings a lot. I feel more anxious about what I don't say. I think that's a really good point too, because especially if you're speaking on something, a topic, like afterwards, there's always that feeling of, oh man, I should have said this. Oh, I forgot to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if you're telling someone after the fact how it went and they say, did you say this? And you're like, no. But sometimes it didn't come. It might not be a speech where you can control everything that's said. Let's say someone else is talking back to you, or they're asking you questions, or someone else is yelling out, or, depending on the circumstance, maybe in a perfect world, you wished you would have gotten all that in, but it just didn't go down that way in that moment.
Right. No, that happens. Even just in general, when you're delivering some kind of a message or you're talking about something. So like recently, this past weekend, I was interviewed by a national newspaper here in regards to the state of English teaching in the country. And I was like, I had all these different points that I was like, here, this, blah, blah, blah. And our time had come to an end, and there was just still so much more that I wanted to say, and then we were supposed to potentially catch back up later, but we never did. And so even afterwards, I'm sending him messages in the chat, like, oh yeah, don't forget this, don't forget this. Like, it was just what I didn't get a chance to say, but I felt like should be included.
Yeah, I had that experience in court not too long ago, where I was making my.
Well, I think that's a little bit more critical.
Well, the thing is this though, people often don't realize that in court, because it's different from what you see on TV. In court, the written papers are where it mostly gets decided, right? The oral argument is for questions the judge might have on the margins, or things that are bothering the judge, or just to give you an opportunity to explain what's going on. But they're going to go back and they're going to read everything. So when you give your oral presentation, you're not covering everything that's in the papers. It's just impossible, especially if you start to give an outline of what's going on and then you get interrupted with questions. Let's say the judge asks you a bunch of questions and then they start moving you, and then they say you only have a minute left. You just can't cover everything, right? And so you have to prioritize your main points. But then sometimes you leave thinking, man, I wish I would have gotten that one point, or made that point clearer, or said that in a different way, or emphasized this, or, what I mean? Like, the points I said were great, but I left this thing out that I didn't want to leave out. That does happen.
And then that reminded me, like, remember, in the pregame, we were talking about that I just rewatched the Total Slaughter battle with Joe Budden and Hollow the Dawn. And when you were saying, like, you've got things you got to get out, and then the judge is asking you questions, and then they're like, okay, you only have a minute left. And it just reminded me, thinking like you there being like Joe Budden, like, stop my time, stop my time.
Yeah, right.
Yo, I'm not done, stop my time.
Yeah
That'd be hilarious. So no, stop it, judge, stop my time. I got more. Let me get these bars off.
Get these bars off. That's right.
Yeah,
they do that at the appellate level. They're much more rigid in terms of the time and the formalities of it all. When you give your argument, when you begin your argument in appellate court, they'll ask you, do you want to reserve any of your time for rebuttals? And that's like a rap battle, right? And you can say, yes, I've got 10 minutes total, but I'm going to go for 8 minutes, and I'm going to save 2 minutes, because he's going to, the other lawyer, he or she is going to go for 10 minutes, and they're going to respond to what I say, but I'm going to reserve 2 of my minutes to answer back to what they just said, right?
Right.
It's like my second round, my rebuttal freestyle bar. And that's when you have to think on your feet, because you might have an idea of what they're going to say. And of course you have your papers so you can see what they wrote, but they might come up with something that was a little unexpected, and they're trying to throw you off your game. So in your rebuttal, you want to be able to respond to what they just said. And of course, in your opening statements and your main argument, that's all planned. You can plan that out as long as you want, but you really have to think quick on your rebuttal, because now you're responding directly to what they just said a second ago, right?
Right, absolutely. So, interesting. Question in the chat, Mike, do you ever get scolded by the judge for leading the witness?
No, but you could. I mean, so if you have a witness on the stand, you are not, if it's your witness, you can't ask a leading question, right? So you can't ask a question that suggests the answer. What would happen though, most often, is the other side is going to object, and they'll say objection, leading question, and then the judge would say, sustained or overruled. And there's a whole strategy in that. Sometimes you actually want the other side to object a lot because it makes it sound like they're trying to keep things out. They're afraid, right? Some information they don't want the court to hear. And even if it gets officially kept out, people are people.
Still say
it leaves an impression on people. Even if they can't officially use it, they might come off that thinking, wait a minute, why are they so nervous? What are they trying to hide here? Why are they objecting to everything coming to light, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you do that as a tactic, but no, the closest I can think to that as far as being scolded by a judge would be sometimes if I make a point and I'm trying to say it in a different way to emphasize it or to highlight a point, sometimes I'll say, counsel, you already made that point, move on to the next one. You get that.
Right. True. Yeah. Very interesting stuff. Well, what do we got this week?
Yeah, speaking of interesting stuff, right? The Mayor Adams here in New York City went to Latin America to speak with leaders there and even residents, I guess, trying to get to the source of what he calls misinformation out there about why people are so quick to come to the US. This is all an effort really to discourage residents of Latin America from coming here because, as we know, New York City is being hit with the brunt of this. They're being bussed in large numbers to New York, and the mayor is now taking it upon himself to actually go to Latin America to try to put a stop to this or slow it down.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, is it really his place to do it? I mean, New York is a major city, but it's still a city within the country, and that's international relations there. Plus, at the same time, like, they're not coming directly to come to New York. They're coming to the States, and then the internal politics is funneling people to New York, which is causing that overcrowding. Now, at the same time, I mean, I feel for his position because, I mean, he's in a bad position. I mean, the reality is that there is that overflow in New York. It is going to cause a strain, or is causing a strain on the city, and the governor nor the presidential administration seem to be willing to help alleviate that. And so I can see where he's trying to think outside the box.
Right. There's some critique here from people saying, why isn't he spending his time going to the federal government of the US, right? As opposed to going to Latin America and acting like he is the head of state. I mean, he's almost acting like he's the president or an ambassador or a diplomat or, some kind of figure with foreign policy authority or credentials. I mean, he's the mayor of New York City. Why is he not spending his time talking to our government? Now, I'm sure he's going to say he's doing that as well. And in fact, that he's as a part of his strategy. But, was it something he should have been entertaining at all? Is it just a PR move, right? Because he was asked, what did you gain from this trip? And from what I'm seeing, there aren't very many clear answers here. His quote was it successful 100%? I don't know that. We're not going to know if someone is going to hear the voice of the city, say you were not coming to a 5-star hotel. I'm hoping they did, but I have to try everything to help the city deal with the crisis we are facing. He said he was trying to get to the circulation of misinformation that has painted the city as the best possible place to come. So I'm not seeing a very clear report here as far as what exactly he aimed to accomplish, what he did accomplish in terms of specifics, right? I get the general gist of it is discourage people from coming, but how are you achieving that? And did this trip serve that purpose? Or was it just a way to get him in the papers and make it look like he's out here trying to fight the problem?
Right. Yeah. I mean, what really would it accomplish? I mean, I think, even if he's talking to officials in those countries, I mean, what is that going to change? What are they going to do? Like, lock up people so they can't leave? Put a cage around the country or something? Like, there are other things that have to be dealt with to prevent people from coming across the border, and more importantly, to deal with what's happening with places like Texas that are just funneling people up to New York because they have their own views on things. It's more of an internal struggle in that regard. Yeah, I don't know what that would accomplish.
So apparently he went to Mexico, Ecuador, and Colombia. He also visited the Darien Gap, which is that lawless area between Central and South America, right? It's between Panama and Colombia, which is an area where many people have to cross because it's really the only land route to get towards the US from South America. So people coming from Venezuela in particular will have to cross the Darien Gap to get up into Central America, through Mexico into the US eventually. But it's certainly something that, you can gain knowledge from looking at, but I'm not sure how useful that is in his capacity as mayor.
Right.
Right. I don't know how that's his job as mayor better.
Right. That might have been a trip more suited to someone from like the State Department or something.
Right. Right. I mean, what is his role when it comes to even our border policy? Now, I understand he's going to go to the federal government and try to lobby them and get them to respond in certain ways, but it's kind of, arguably speaking, this could be argued both ways, I suppose, but arguably speaking, on its face, at least, it seems like it's outside the bounds of what a mayor is there to do. On the other hand, this is a very serious crisis, and maybe it does require unorthodox solutions or approaches, or maybe just trying things outside the box is what we need here, right? Because we've been talking about this for a while. Many people don't seem to have concrete, strong solutions to this, or at least, if there are solutions, it seems like they're going to be plentiful. In other words, it's not going to be like one thing we can do to stop this. It seems like we just need to do a lot of maybe small things and some big things, and hopefully cumulatively it will have a positive effect. And so maybe you do need an all hands on deck, all of the above approach.
And to be fair, he did go reach out to the governor of New York. He did reach out to, the federal government, and basically the response that he's been given is that, deal with it. They don't seem to be willing to help in the way that he seems to need help or would like to get help. So the governor wasn't interested in his idea of spreading some of the population around, of people coming through to different areas across the state. The federal government blamed him for not having an exit strategy, which I don't know, that's kind of crazy, because not like he planned to have all of them come to New York City. So, maybe he's back in a corner.
And I think when he speaks of the misinformation, a lot of that is in the US and in New York City even. You'll see people accusing the mayor of essentially bringing this crisis on himself. They say, well, he asked everyone to come and he wants them all here. And now he's trying to undo the damage he caused. When I don't think that's a fair assessment of the situation, and then you have people on the other side of it who say that he was a Republican and he still has these conservative ideas, and they're accusing him of being too conservative on the issue. So it seems like he's being attacked from both sides on this. Yeah,
it's not an enviable position, and it's a very, it's a very difficult one. Not even just the position, but just the topic itself. It's one that has been long debated in the country, even before his tenure. This with migrants coming over the border versus asylum seekers coming over the border, or what have you. So it's there are no easy answers on that subject.
Mayor says he intends to present a plan to federal lawmakers on how they can partner with Colombia to slow the pace down. And he also wants to meet with former President Bill Clinton to discuss potential solutions, given his experience of Latin America policy.
I think I don't know if it's talked about enough. And that's one thing that I've said should happen, is that the United States should be communicating with the governments from these countries and seeing what they can do to help, because the people that are leaving the countries to come to the US under duress are not, it's not because they want to necessarily come. I'm sure they love their home countries, but they have no other choices. And so if conditions were better, in those countries, or safer, or whatever it was that were causing the reasons for them to migrate, then we probably see a slowing of that migration. We probably see less people trying to come across the border and risk such a dangerous journey to do so, because it's very treacherous. It takes, I mean, imagine walking all of Mexico to get from one side to the other to get through. Like that's you know,
that's not
so I think
walking to Brooklyn for a cheesecake.
Right, you know what I mean? Like, so I think, maybe there's some help that's needed. If people are running over because, I don't know, Mexico's having a hard time dealing with the cartels and people are leaving because it's too dangerous, then what is it that the United States can do to help? Or what is it that the international community can do to help in these regards, or things like that?
And that is some perspective that the mayor might have gained from his visit. He might have seen the treacherous conditions, how difficult it is to make that journey, and that I'm sure would give anyone some perspective on, wow, for us to be willing to put ourselves through this in order to make it here, how bad must it be in our homeland, right?
Right.
And
right.
maybe that is a wake-up call. Maybe that would be to anyone if you were able to witness that firsthand and think,
Right.
something needs to be done. Now, there's always a valid question of whose job is it to do, right? But
Right.
I think it just shows that the conditions that people must be living in are untenable for them to risk doing all of that to make it here. It's not
Right. In the chat, Jeremy says some of the countries don't want U.S. interference. Is this a myth? My idea wouldn't be the U.S. going in and say, okay, this is what you're going to do. It's more, what can we do to help? I don't think the U.S. should go in and try to pretend like they're the rulers of things and occupy the space and say they're going to take control. Like, show up there and be like, okay, where are the gaps in your fight here? Can we assist in this? Because we are neighbors. If like it or not, if you're talking about problems with the cartels, America does bear a lot of responsibility to that, because we are the number one purchasers of the drugs coming from those cartels. But the international community can come through. I mean, we're dealing with basically a humanitarian crisis. If you got that many people that are taking this long journey from different countries to get to somewhere else, there's something that's lacking in the humanitarian space that could use some help. And I would think the UN and other countries or neighbors could be like, hey, maybe we can work together to elevate everyone in the region, so that this is not something that we're seeing.
Right. But if it's a matter of directing more money to those countries, we kind of find ourselves almost in that same situation. Right now, we're talking about a strain on our resources and essentially not having enough money to pay for this. Well, we would be doing essentially the same thing. I mean, either we're spending money to take care of the problem here, or we're spending it over there, but it's still seemingly a strain on resources, right?
Right. I wouldn't think just throwing money at it. I mean, there should be some kind of a cooperation that happens, but I don't think just throwing money necessarily at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's got to be some other solutions and people that can sit down and think, what can we do here to be better neighbors to at least alleviate the problem a little bit, or whatnot.
Right. So I'm interested to know what people think out there about this. Is the mayor doing his job in visiting Latin America? Do you see this as more a useless PR stunt? What is it in your estimation? How do you feel about it? So the poll question of the week is, do you agree with Mayor Adams' efforts to reach out to Latin American countries and encourage their residents not to migrate to the U.S.?
That was kind of smooth how you jumped directly into the poll question. I didn't even see it coming.
Well,
I was like, wait, where's he going? Where's he going? Then, oh, okay, the poll question. Okay.
Like a behind the back pass.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
So
that's what's up.
And experience, right?
Exactly. And then
getting those reps in.
That's right. That's right. You're out here shooting in the gym right now.
That's right. So we'll see what people think about this. There was another effort, I suppose, that was in the news regarding the border wall, right?
Mm. You're right. So it appears that Biden is going to be building, well, not him himself, because that might be funny though. About 20 miles worth of the border wall that's on the southern border between Mexico and the US.
Well,
And
is it the president building it though, or is it being built through monies appropriated by Congress?
right, and that is what needs to be more succinctly said. And Biden was asked specifically about it because in his campaign in 2020, he said that he wasn't going to build it, but he was asked this past week about it, and he said that, look, he tried to get the funds reappropriated. The opposition wouldn't allow it. This money was already appropriated for the wall, so there's nothing that he can do. It has to be used for that purpose. And then a reporter followed up with a question immediately after saying, do you think the border wall would be ineffective? And he just flat out said, would be effective. And he flat out said no. So it appears that he doesn't want to do it, which would be in line with what he promised in his campaign. But if it's already appropriated and there's nothing that he can do, then his hands are tied and it just has to be done.
Right. Yeah, and once money gets earmarked for certain things, you really can't use it for anything else. And then it's just there, not being spent. I remember that when it came to the Rockaway Ferry, I think when Anthony Weiner was congressman way back in the day, he had money allocated for the ferry. It was just sitting there, and so the city was able to opt to use it or not, but the money couldn't be used for any other purpose, right? So if they were going to access all this money that was allocated to them, they had to use it to do the ferry.
Right.
Because Congress set the parameters as to what that money is used for.
Right. So, yeah, so that's, I wonder if he could he just not build it and let the money just sit in the account?
Yeah, well, it depends, I guess, on how it's appropriated, right?
Right.
And who was calling for it in the first place? I'm guessing it wasn't the president who asked for that to be put in there.
Right. So, but I guess it's the fact of the matter, it's getting done. About 20 miles worth is getting done. And he was very upfront about he's not happy with the fact that there's nothing that he can do regarding this. So
yeah, I mean, do you think that a border wall is ever an effective tool?
I don't think so. There are so many ways around it. But it's not unheard of in history. I mean, that's the Great Wall of China was basically built to keep the Huns out, if I'm not mistaken.
Also, there are many miles of wall already, and it's nothing.
Right.
I mean, on our southern border, we have it. There are just certain areas that don't have it.
Right, and I think that's another important thing. Like people who are so pro wall or so anti wall is that there's already something there in most cases, and so. Yeah, I don't think it's effective though. I think it's a waste of money. There's better ways to do that. But here we are.
Yeah, it does seem like there's so much pressure to do something that sometimes people reach for these symbolic gestures, right? They think if you say, oh, I voted on this wall, I got this wall built, that's going to make them look good because it looks like they're the heroes. They stopped it, even though we know that building a little wall is not going to solve the problem. But I think maybe some voters think it will, or it just looks good. Like it looks like they're taking a stand and getting something achieved, right? It's like, it's a symbolic picture. You might say that the Mayor Adams going to Latin America is symbolic in that way also. It just looks like they're on their job trying to get something done, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's performative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
It photographs well, right?
Right. Exactly. So I don't know. I think helping the human condition that's causing people to feel they need to vacate is a better strategy, than putting up border walls, which is kind of a punitive measure. Hey, we're back to kind of the carrot and the stick,
Carrot and stick.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting poll. We'll see what the people have to say in regards to that. And we do have our poll from last week too.
Our poll from last week, yeah. So that was about the speaker being ousted for the first time in U.S. history, right? We wanted to know if the people agreed with that move.
Right. So, yes, posted up the poll there. Brought up a pretty good discussion over it. So the question was, do you agree that Speaker Kevin McCarthy should have been ousted from his role as Speaker of the House? 82% said yes, and 18% said no. So,
okay.
I'm sorry?
Okay, so most people saying yes.
Yeah, most people said yes. However, there were a number of things that kept being brought up in the discussion that I think were good points. One guy took kind of a middle line approach, saying that do I think he should have been ousted? Probably not, but only because the GOP caucus can't replace him. But more importantly, do I think the Democrats should have saved McCarthy? No way, especially since he offered nothing in return.
Well,
so it's
you did have all the Democrats voting to oust him, though. So is it a matter of saving him or not, or is it a matter of them actively removing him?
Well, here's the thing, and a number of people in the comments had the same point, is they wish the Democrats would have abstained from voting. They just should have just showed up, and then what it would have done is highlighted that this was a Republican mess, right? He wouldn't have lost his speakership, so in that way they would have saved him, because I mean they didn't have enough votes to oust him from Republicans only, and so. But what it would have done was showcase this infighting that's going on in the Republican Party.
Here's my question, and it's a procedural one. I guess we might have to do some digging on this, but I can tell you in the state legislature, at least, the speaker or the majority leader, whoever it is who's in control, essentially decides unilaterally what gets voted on and what doesn't, right? I'm assuming that Speaker McCarthy didn't put this up for a vote voluntarily, right? So how was it even voted on? If the speaker controls the agenda, how did it even get to a vote?
Right, because what wasn't it? Gates was the one that called for the vote, but
he was pushing the team with all of the Democrats, which is funny in itself, right? All the Democrats, I think some did abstain, right? Because some just weren't present for the vote for whatever reason. You can read into that, but all of them who were present voted to remove him. And then you had, I think, 8 Republicans joining the effort. These were the more conservative Republicans joining all the Democrats to get rid of McCarthy, who was considered more moderate, I guess, on a Republican scale. So that's how they got the votes, right? But procedurally speaking, how was that brought to it?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. No idea.
Unless there's some mechanism in the House rules that allows for a recall type vote. And obviously in that situation, the speaker is not going to vote to or initiate that vote, him or herself. And so maybe there's a special procedure for that.
Right. And like I said, it kept coming up over and over again. They wish Democrats would have just abstained or just, voted here and then kind of bowed out of the situation. And there were some who said specifically for what he was voted out for, no, they don't agree with it. And they kind of, we touched on it last week, that it kind of seemed like he was doing the job for the job's sake and not for party, when he tried to keep the country open, even against the fringes of his party, which is probably what prompted this to go on. And so for him to be voted out for that, or being put to a vote for that, isn't really a good reason.
Yeah, and it seems like it sets a dangerous precedent now, where anytime you have the votes potentially to remove a speaker, they're going to go ahead and do it, right? I mean, because if he could be removed for something which doesn't seem like a very persuasive reason, why else are they going to be trying to get rid of speakers. I'm sure they'll be doing things in the future that seem worse than that, right? And now we have the precedent that this has happened before for less.
Right. And he hasn't done himself any favors, right? I mean, first of all, it took so many times to get in because no one wanted him in. So there was already his party and the opposite party didn't want him around. He didn't go with what the fringes of his party wanted as far as the shutdown. And then on the other side, he's up for this impeachment hearing on Biden with no facts. So he really has no support, so it's kind of amazing that he lasted as long as he did.
Well, except for the fact that this has never happened before in US history. And so I don't think there was an expectation that he would be voted out before his term was up.
Right. But I mean, you would think that someone would be gunning for him beforehand.
Right. Yeah. And
I think
that's been happening. And you know what? The same has been happening with the efforts to impeach the president, right? I mean, obviously, we believe that Trump was impeached twice with good reason, but now we're seeing efforts to impeach Biden. It seems like in the foreseeable future, we're going to see efforts to impeach every president, maybe even before they take office.
And I think that's the precedent that's been set. And I think it started, the talks probably started with Bush. It didn't get to that far, but I mean, Bush was messing up. We know at that point he was the bottom of the barrel, and even in the second term, even Republicans were distancing themselves from him, and so there was this talk of holding him accountable. And then when Obama came in, there was always talk of impeachment with no basis. And that was partially because, in my opinion, partially because of racism, but partially also because of trying to protect or defend against the negativity coming out of the Bush years, because of that bad imagery that they had. And then when Trump gets in and does get impeached with basis, I mean, it's still, again, we've got to deal with this bad imagery, and so we're going to now push back too. And it's like, now we're going to be in a cycle. Like it's
they try ridiculous. To muddy the waters, right? And it's always
right.
Well, what about you guys? You guys do bad things too, or
right.
Also should be impeached, or they try to take some of the heat off of themselves by doing that.
Right. In the chat, Lixa said, I think it started with Clinton. Well, while Clinton did get impeached, I don't think Democrats did like a revenge impeachment, though. Right. I mean, it was a witch hunt with Clinton, but he did lie. But I'm thinking what the Republicans are doing now is more of revenge impeachment, right? Tit for tat type of ideology, extremism. Whereas I don't think Democrats, countered back off of the Clinton impeachment.
Well, yeah, and let's be clear, because I do believe that articles of impeachment have been introduced against every president, right? In recent history, at least. But it doesn't mean that they got anywhere. It could be just a fringe Congress member introducing it for political points or whatever, right?
Right.
But the question is, which ones really took off? Which ones gained the support of enough to be passed or to even make noise and be taken seriously, right? Because I guarantee you, there were articles of impeachment against Biden from almost the first day he was in office. Same with Obama.
Right. Yeah, I don't doubt it. So hopefully this doesn't become just a constant thing, right? And here's the problem is, like, when Democrats put up to impeach Trump, like, there was reason, there's basis behind it. I mean, right now we're looking at 90 indictments that this guy is facing. So there's, where there's smoke, there's fire. And so if the next Republican gets in and has some sort of a muddied background, is doing a lot of questionable things that are worthy of impeachment, and people move to impeach him, it won't be seen as justified. It will be seen as retaliatory, and it just will keep perpetuating the cycle.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if a Republican gets in and they are, above board, and someone moves to impeach him, then yeah, that's retaliatory. But if they're above board and no one moves to impeach him, that should just reset some stability. But is that who's going to be in, put in? Looking at the candidates that are out there now, is that who's going to be, up to that position?
A new Republican?
A new Republican? I think that's optimistic at this point, unfortunately. Like in the comments,
not likely to be elected next year, right?
In the comments of that discussion on the poll, like, I was just remembering, like, remember when we thought like the worst of the worst was Bush, Ryan, and Boehner?
Mm-hmm.
Like, those guys are like pussycats compared to some of these like Marjorie Taylor Greens and
right. People used to be afraid of Mitt Romney. Now he's almost
trying to be a voice of reason.
Right. He's almost cherished by reasonable voices these days.
You know what I mean? Like, Jeb was a horrible guy, but he seems like a voice of reason in that debate that he was in. Like,
it was not on that Trump train. In fact, he, I think, was even trying to help some Democrats get elected in some places who were back some of those Trump forces.
It's crazy. Lixa in the chat, can we be done with this two-party system? I think, that's not going to be so easy to do. And it's not going to be done at the presidential level. I know people keep saying that and they want to vote for a third party candidate. It's not going to happen at the presidential level. I think, in my personal opinion, if you want to get elevate some other parties, you're going to have to start at the local level, because when these two parties start losing seats to third parties, then they're going to have to pay attention to those local areas to make sure that they don't lose those seats.
Right.
And that's no third party candidate is going to win the presidency, not in the foreseeable future.
Not in the near future, no. And it's funny because the majority of Americans now, I think it's in the 60s, in terms of the percentage of Americans who want to see a third party, right? It's most of them will tell you yes, and most will also tell you that they don't want either of the major party frontrunners to be the nominees. With that said, we're going to get that, and they're going to pick one or two of those candidates, right? The third party candidate will not be winning the presidential race. And it is difficult because the parties control the system, right? And so the process that you would have to overcome to establish a third party is controlled by people in power. This isn't some conspiracy. It's just that they hold the power now. And so they're going to set the rules favorable to themselves, right?
Right. And so, like, the only way, in my opinion, the only way to do it is to start winning these local seats, start filling them up with different people from different parties, and spreading that local power around. And people are going to have to campaign differently in that regard.
Well, historically in the U.S., when you've had third party movements pop up, they often have started at the presidential level, right? Not that a third party candidate was successful in winning the presidency, but for example, Teddy Roosevelt, after he was president, right, he supported Taft to replace him, had a falling out with Taft, decided to run again, and did not get the Republican nomination at the time. So he ran third party, the Bull Moose Party. I know Jeremy in the chat is a big fan of the Bull Moose reference. So that effort was not successful in that he did not achieve the presidency again. However, that party became a part, for a few years at least, it became a viable third party throughout the US, and there were local elections won by Bull Moose Party members, right? And so from the top down, you could inspire a movement like that. I don't think you're going to be able to win the White House running now as a third party, but maybe it could spark local parties influenced by, or offshoots of your national party that could do something at the local level.
Right. And I think people at the local level, especially when wins and voting has such slim margins at the local level, the people have a lot more control over which way that the wind blows in that regard. So you can get a couple of big organizations, local community organizations, that go to these parties and say, okay, well, is your candidate willing to do this or interested in this or and that? And if they don't, like, okay, well, we're going to a candidate who does.
Yeah.
And really have a big impact on that. And so I think that's where that needs to come from.
You know, what's funny? There was a candidate who ran for governor of New York named, I believe her name was Samantha A. Minor, right? And she was the mayor of a city in New York, might have been Rochester or Syracuse, I forget which one. But in New York, in particular, the way to officially establish a third party is to run someone for governor and to get a certain number of votes in the gubernatorial race. And if you reach that threshold, then you're recognized by New York as a third party until the next governor's race. And so this one candidate ran, and she had to make up her own party line. She was going to be third party. You pick a party name, but just for her ballot line, she chose the SAM party, which is her initials, Stephanie A. Minor, I believe, right? SAM party. Well, she received enough votes for the SAM party to be recognized as a party in New York for the next 4 years. And they actually ran candidates under the SAM line, but they didn't want to call it Stephanie A. Minor anymore. And so they changed it to, I think, the Save America movement or something like that, right? So, because now they have this party and they got to do something with it. So they try to make it more marketable.
Wasn't what is it? The rent is too damn high party.
That never qualified. No.
Never? It was never? It should have. Well, come on. That's the only party that made sense.
Someone check me on that. Did McMillan
I thought it was.
Votes for governor? Could people ever enroll in the rent is too damn high party? I don't believe so.
You know, I might enroll in there. I might, you know. I like the message. And as a karate expert, I think, you know, the leader of the movement is someone that's very trustworthy. Licks in the chat says, I want to start the they party.
The they party.
Mike Scala's they party.
Oh my goodness.
So
they're taking over the world.
They are. They definitely are. So, but we'll see what the poll results are. And hopefully we get some more lively discussion and debate on it as we did with this previous poll. So
yes. So last topic we can talk about briefly before we sign off here. There was an unfortunate, really a tragic incident in Brooklyn recently. It was a young man who was stabbed with his girlfriend, and they were coming back from a wedding. They took the Long Island Railroad back to Brooklyn, and they were waiting at a bus stop at about 4:00 in the morning when the man was stabbed by someone walking by. It seems this guy knocked over some scooters first. You know, he passed them. He walked past the bench they were sitting on, kicked over some scooters, and then you can see from the surveillance video, the couple got up and started walking towards this guy who kicked over the scooters, and a confrontation ensued, which resulted in the man who was with his girlfriend being stabbed to death. A very tragic incident that has been politicized to high hell. And I think this is just an example of how it's dangerous that we politicize everything so much, because this is all over social media, or has been over the past week. And people are saying all sorts of things, really just trying to make their political points that they already had. They have these agendas and they've been trying to make them maybe for years. And then everything that happens, they try to find a way to contort it to fit their agenda. So of course, this being a stabbing, you have your people saying, oh, you see, so guns don't kill people, people can kill people in other ways. Like, as if anyone ever said that a knife is not possible to use as a murder weapon, right? Like, so you have that. Then you have the fact that this gentleman, his name was Ryan Carson. He was apparently a left-wing activist of some sort. And so of course, people are bringing that into it and saying that his own political leanings were somehow responsible for his death because it made him confront the guy instead of walking away. He thought he was going to be a nice guy. I don't know what they're even getting at with that, but it's just tragic that this happened, and tragic on another level that people are politicizing every element of it. I see it as a microcosm of what we've got going on in society now, where you can't get away from it. Anything that happens, you'll see, we talked about this. This is what happens when you vote Democrat or you keep voting Republican or whatever. It has nothing to do with that. Right. This was incident of violence on the street, a man getting stabbed, and it becomes entirely too political.
Yeah, I mean, people want to validate their own position, and do it whatever way they can, and everybody does it. It's not useful, especially in the public discourse, and it's very extreme at this present time.
Yeah, yeah, and there's no way that we can come to any kind of consensus or solutions when we're this divided, and it's a visceral reaction people have, right?
Right.
Serves him right. Here was another one. Apparently, he laughed on social media when Rush Limbaugh died. I believe that's what it is. And so some people are saying that this serves him right. You know, it's karma because he laughed at another man dying, so he deserves to be killed.
It's just so much hate, right?
Yeah.
Right now, there's just or it's just maybe not right now. It's probably always been there. It's just that it's so out front. It's so blatant and in the mainstream, and we've got a lot that we got to do to curb that, to get away from that, to get that out of the public discourse. And it just seems like it's a losing battle in many regards.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like it's just amplified to extreme volumes now, to the point.
Well, because everyone has a voice, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, one of the pros of things like social media is that anyone can put a message out and be read by the world. And then one of the issues with that is that the wrong message could get amplified, right? Those echo chambers, people can find echo chambers to fit into instead of before where you didn't have that access. It's just, it's a bonus and a negative, but how do we steer around that?
Yeah, that we tone it down and get our priorities in check. Not everything needs to be politicized to the nth degree.
Right.
Here, someone wrote, coming home from a wedding at 4 a.m. Random? Nothing is random. There is more to this story. Unfortunately, we will never know it. So they're trying to make a conspiracy out of it. Yeah, like why are they coming home at 4 a.m.? And I agree that that's a dangerous time to be out taking a bus in Brooklyn or anywhere really, but they're trying to make it act out like the they is responsible for this, right? The they in the sky.
Yeah, that I mean, everybody thinks that some kind of not everybody. There's a lot of people that think there's a conspiracy behind everything that happens, and to be fair, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, but not everything is a conspiracy. Yeah. Like him being there at 4 a.m. in the morning, it would take a lot of wrangling to force that to happen so that a stabbing could take place.
Right. I do have this reaction, and maybe some people will say I'm politicizing. I'm trying not to politicize this, but I mean, because the thing is this, you can't even have a conversation because everything is political. That's the other side of this, right? Everything is political now. And so whatever you say is going to be looked at through a political lens.
Scala hot take.
No, it's not even that. It's that it's dangerous to be out taking public transportation at that time of night. And so they would have been safer in a car or an Uber. And I know the narrative now is that that's not something that we should be encouraging, right? That everyone should be on public transit. But I do think that there is a safety issue here. That, is it safe, especially now when you look at the incidents of crime that we see, and oftentimes they do take place on or around public transportation. Should we be encouraging everyone to be on trains and buses at all hours of the night? I think there's a legitimate safety consideration there.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, though, like, some people have no other choice. Like, I mean, I think, I know when I used to work, I was manager for a retail place in Hawaii, and I used to have to take the first bus in the morning, and that wouldn't start at till 5:30, and so you're talking about 5 o'clock, 4:30, I would be on the bench at the bus stop.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I would just fall asleep on the bench, which was probably not the safest, but that's, but sometimes people, I mean, there are even if it's not someone coming from a wedding, there are people who may have to take public transportation at 4 a.m. to get to work.
Some people may have to, sure.
Yeah.
But should we be encouraging everyone and basically shaming people, right? Like that's what's happening now. People are being shamed into never taking a car and always being on the bus or on the train. And I'm saying that might not be the safest option all the time.
Maybe it might not be, you know, so it's a tragedy either way.
Yeah.
You know, you would hope that even at 4 a.m. in the morning that nothing would happen in a civilized society.
Right. But we are seeing more and more of these incidents.
Right.
You know, we definitely need to do something about it. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, let's hope not. But, you know, hopefully something can be done. What is this? In the chat, it's okay to take public transportation at 4 a.m., but don't approach someone who is mentally unstable. I mean, I don't know about this incident, but sometimes that's unavoidable. You know, if the person is mentally unstable, sometimes they come to you.
Yeah.
And walking away, even if they aren't, walking away is not always a real solution, because they will just follow you. You know,
Right.
if it's a person that's intent on doing something, whether you check out or not is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, and it's unclear from the video, at least from what I saw, because there was no sound on the video that I saw. I don't know if they were confronting him intentionally. It did seem odd that after this guy walked past them and knocked over the scooters, they got up and started walking towards him. So they might have confronted him. Maybe he said, hey man, what are you doing? I don't know. I didn't hear that. But it did seem odd that they got up from the bus stop and started walking towards him. Maybe that wasn't the best move, but I really don't know how it went down because you couldn't hear anything.
Right. Yeah. It could be a number of situations and scenarios.
Yeah, it could have been a coincidence that they were getting up and walking that way, but maybe the guy saw it as him being confronted or approached, you know, I don't know. Because from what I read, he yelled out, what are you looking at, to the guy? And then he said, I'm going to kill you right now, and took out a knife and came after him.
Who said, what are you looking at?
The guy who kicked over the scooters.
Oh.
He said, yeah, that to the guy. And, you know, and you see him, and apparently he says, from what I read, he said, I'm going to kill you right now. He takes out a knife, and then you see in the video of them struggling, the guy tries to push him back, and then he turns to run, and he trips over the bench that he was just sitting on, and he falls to the ground, and the guy stabs him. I think he stabs him in the back and kills him.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. So, well, hopefully things, like I said, hopefully they do get better instead of getting worse.
Yeah. But I think for us to get to that point, we need to, as I've said before, turn down the heat, really stop politicizing. That's gonna be my bottom line for the week.
I was gonna say, it just sounded like you're going into a bottom line. Go ahead. Let him cook.
No, the bottom line is stop politicizing everything, right? Let's put people over politics, because I know there's an urge to make everything overtly political, but that hinders our ability to reach any kind of solution. All it does is keep us at each other's throats.
Right, absolutely. And I think it's a good thing to reiterate, right? It's something that we need to keep in mind all the time, so that we can try to move away from that. And with that being said, people can find us on YouTube at Nuance Show, Instagram at Nuance Show, and everywhere that podcasts are, and in your dreams, baby.
All right, I like that. And once again, we are marching towards 100,000 views on YouTube. We will do something special. We have to commemorate that in some way. So why don't you guys let us know, what should we do when we get to 100,000 views. As always, we've got work to do, and we'll catch you next time.